Depending on where you look, between 51 and 61% of you agree with me on what I believe is the most critical element to any and all hopes of BYU football having a more successful season this fall. Well, what is that? Stay tuned.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? I'm Jake Hatch, your host here on Locked On Cougars, resident BYU insider. Thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. And of course, I appreciate every single one of you who are everydayers with us right here on your original daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege to save $20 off your first purchase. Of course, some terms apply. All right, let's dive right in on today's show. And as I teased in the open, between 51 and 61% of you agree with me on what BYU needs to do to improve this fall. No, it's not quarterback play. No, it's not having a defense that is going to be out of the hundreds in terms of the statistical analysis of a season a year ago for BYU football. What is it? Well, I threw out the question on social media, and also I threw it out to our Locked On Cougars Insider group, and I said this: in your opinion, which of the following areas of improvement will be the most impactful to BYU football improving this season? Option A, an improved run game offensively. Option B, increased pressure and sacks, or what I like to call havoc rates for BYU on defense. Letter C, or option C, improved quarterback play. And then option D, a better rush defense. Well, the overwhelming majority of you, 51.5% in fact, on our Locked On Cougars Insider group, and then astonishingly 61% of you on Twitter say that it's an improved running game. And I'm going to say y'all are smart people for picking that option. Why? Because that is the single most critical element, I feel like, to BYU being a far more competitive team in the Big 12 this fall. Why? Well, simply put, if BYU has a better rushing offense, it's going to take stress off quite literally every other facet in the BYU football program. We have spent an inordinate amount of time at this training camp talking about the BYU quarterback battle, and for good reason. The quarterback at BYU, unlike many universities out there, gets the lion's share of the attention, the lion's share of the blame, and also just shoulders an immense shadow in terms of being that quote-unquote QB1 in Provo. You become a celebrity. It's just the simple fact of the matter. And between Jake Retzlaff and Gerry Bohanon, it is a battle that continues on. When will we find out who BYU starting quarterback? Well, quite honestly, probably not till game time on August 31st, because the way BYU's been slow playing this, it feels like they are intent on holding it until the last possible second. Maybe it truly has been a battle and they haven't decided, but at this juncture, I would hope they would at least have an idea of who they're leaning towards. The bigger point to be made here is that if BYU wants to have success as a team and they want to take some stress off of those quarterbacks, because I'll admit I've seemed to sense some pressure on both of them that I think they've been carrying in practice, and it has yielded, based on what I have heard/read, some less than favorable results at times in practices, more importantly in scrimmages for the BYU football program, because I think both of them are pressing a little bit, trying to prove themselves worthy of being QB1 in Provo. The number one thing that could help them settle down, settle in, and be a far more effective quarterback for the BYU football program would be to have a rushing attack that can be more reminiscent of Jamal Williams, Tyler Algier. Going to go way back, look at guys like Harvey Unga. When BYU's had its most success offensively historically, yes, there are prolific passing numbers across the board in those seasons, but kind of the undercurrent in all that is a rushing attack that is very effective and is a very good complement to BYU. I'll be blunt and say that I don't think that a guy like Jake Retzlaff and or Gerry Bohanon are in the same class as some of the great quarterbacks in BYU's pantheon of quarterback history. They're not in that same level, at least right now, of quarterback play, even to the level of, let's say, a Jaron Hall or a Zach Wilson in more recent memory. The thing about it is each one of those quarterbacks of yesteryear for BYU have had good running backs who have complemented them. The hope is this year for BYU is that LJ Martin is ready to step forward and really become that quote-unquote bell cow back for BYU and challenge for a 1,000-yard season. In fact, I think if LJ Martin were to run for 1,000 yards this year, BYU is going to be a team that wins easily 6 and surpasses maybe 7 wins on the season. I really believe that. With the complement of having guys like Hinckley Rapati alongside him, Miles Davis, and freshmen like Pokai Haunga, I think that would be a very, very nice number to see one running back do that, because the complementary numbers around that would obviously boost that number as well. The other thing is it would allow the quarterbacks, whether it is Jake or Gerry, to settle in and not have to worry so much about, quote unquote, winning the game themselves. Both of them have the ability to scramble. Both of them feature the ability to be part of the rushing attack with their legs if BYU calls upon them, and I expect that that will be a part of BYU's offense. But I think the bigger point to be made here is, so long as BYU's offensive line, and you guys have heard Connor Pay every time he's been on this podcast as recently as yesterday, for those of you who are everydayers, you heard him talk about the fact that he's got confidence that BYU's rushing attack, and more importantly, the offensive line, is going to be an improved unit this year. And if that is indeed the case, A, it's going to open big holes for BYU to run the football. B, it's going to protect these quarterbacks better, and it will obviously lend itself to a more effective offense than BYU had a season ago. There was a large chunk of that season, I want to say 6 or 7 games last year, the BYU's rushing offense was projecting to have, I think it was his worst season in at least 60, maybe 70 years in terms of the overall yardage run for. Now, they had a surge towards the end of the year, obviously, that got them out of that territory, but it was a paltry, and I mean a paltry rushing attack. I'm not telling you guys anything you didn't know if you watched those games a year ago for BYU. But the bigger thing is BYU needs to have that rushing attack be able to pick up 3, 4, 5 yards on any given down. If you can do that, and they use the term to get ahead of the chains, where it becomes, let's say, a 2nd and 5, or it's a 3rd and 3, you're going to convert first downs far more often in that circumstance than if you were to pick up 1 or 2 yards rushing, where you're facing a 3rd and 7 or a 3rd and 8 scenario because you couldn't pick up the yards, like was a big part of the chunk of last season for BYU. The other thing I look at with this is that BYU wants to be a team that is feared. They want to be a team that, no matter if they're playing at home or on the road, they dictate the terms that you play on. They want to be I like to use the term bully ball team. They want to be a team that goes out there, forces the ball down your throat all game long until you're sick of it and you're about to spit the bit. And then they're going to go over the top with you on play action and score touchdowns with downfield passing. That's been a big hallmark of what BYU's most success has been recently with those offenses. And can they get back to that? Well, the number one thing that has to happen is you have a rushing attack that is going to force opposing teams to bring 7, 8 guys into the box and allow BYU to play action off of that. They did not have that a season ago. It was quite literally, at times, you'd see maybe a 5 or 6 man box, and they were still effectively slowing down the BYU rushing attack, and that makes it near impossible to really run an effective offense. So if BYU's rushing attack is better this season, and everybody I've talked to around it, speaking of guys like Connor Pay, other coaches and players inside the program, they have expressed confidence that BYU has improved in that category. If they have indeed done that, BYU is going to be a far better team this fall if it is more effective rushing the football. I'm going to give the final word to my good friend Nick Lee. Now, Nick is a dear friend of the podcast. He's also, if you're a Seattle Seahawks fan, he's part of the Seattle Seahawks version of this podcast, so Locked On Seahawks. Check that out. But he sums it up, I think, perfectly, but why the rushing attack would affect and help every other element of the BYU football program. The other 3 options we put into that poll question. I'm going to read this to you guys real quick. He says this, quote, improved run game equals more time of possession, equals less pressure on QB, equals improved QB play, equals more sustained drives, equals a fresh, not fatigued defense, which equals better pressure and rush defense as well. As he says, fix the run game and O-line, and all your woes seem to go away. It's crazy to think that one thing can have that effect on BYU, but I could not have said it better myself than what Nick just said. Fix the run game, get a better offensive line play, and see a lot of the ills, as many of you might call it, about the BYU football program fade into the memory. And ultimately, time will tell if they can accomplish that, but fingers crossed they do that, and they do it this fall. All right, we're going to continue talking BYU football, but we're going to talk about the end of training camp. Today is the final day of BYU training camp. We're going to talk about the outcomes, maybe some awards handed out, that type of stuff, and we'll delve into that coming up next, right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Game Time. Now, Game Time is here for you guys no matter what type of live event you want to go to. Comedy, music, sporting events, theater, no matter what you're into, Game Time's got the options for you guys. They have a new feature on their app, which is called the Game Time Picks feature that makes getting tickets to your favorite live events even easier. What it is Game Time Picks filters out all the fluff to show you only incredible deals to get great seats, so you don't have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets at the venue or event you're wanting to go out to. You're not having to scroll and scroll and scroll. They're going to give you the best deals so you can pick them, purchase them, and get on your way to the event you're looking forward to going to. The best part is right now you can use all the app features to help you find the right seat for you when you go out there. But that Game Time Picks app, curation makes it easier to make save more on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, and etc. And the best part is with all-in pricing in the app, you see exactly what you'll be paying for up front. You're not having to worry about, okay, what kind of fees I'm being hit with. Hit the all-in pricing feature feature inside the app, and you will see that pop up right away. So take the guesswork out of buying your concert tickets and every other ticket with our friends at Game Time right now. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use the promo code LOCKEDONCollege and get $20 off your first purchase. Once again, terms apply. Create that account and redeem the promo code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That's LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Now, FanDuel is here for you guys, no matter what you're into when it comes to your sports betting needs, but you've heard us talk a lot about FanDuel and offers they have had for you guys quite literally over the years that we've been working with them. The best part is they're changing it up as we head into football season. So right now through September 22nd, all FanDuel customers can bet $5 and get a free 3-week trial of NFL Sunday Ticket from YouTube and YouTube TV. And then with YouTube TV base plan, you'll be able to watch every regular season Sunday afternoon out-of-market game with NFL Sunday Ticket. And all you need is an active Google account, a current form of payment, and you can cancel at any time. No problems at all. I am a YouTube TV disciple. I have used them as my TV provider for years now. It's a great way to consume the sports you're looking for, but more importantly, support your NFL team if you live out of market with a free offer from our friends at FanDuel. So just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and download America's #1 sportsbook. Once again, that's FanDuel.com/lockedon. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Want to encourage you guys, if you've not done so already, and you're trying to get ready for the season ahead, it is back. And what we have done is covering the SEC, the ACC, the Big 10, and the Big 12 like we do on the Locked On College football channel. Well, you can get it all as we get ready for the season ahead. You subscribe to the Locked On College Football podcast right now on YouTube, wherever you get your podcast. You'll find out who has a chance to make the playoff, which teams are going to create chaos in their new conference homes, everything you know all in one place. Be sure to follow and subscribe to the Locked On College Football podcast. It's all part of the Locked On Podcast Network, of course, where it is your team every day. All right, let's talk about BYU training camp. Now, today is the formal end of training camp, as Connor Pay detailed yesterday. BYU will have meetings today, and then starting tomorrow, it is game week mode for the BYU Cougars. They'll spend about a week and a half getting ready for that opener against Southern Illinois, and I feel like it's a long time coming because it really has been a long time coming for the BYU football program. The thing I wanted to talk about today is to talk about what I'm taking out of training camp as we now make that transition into game week mode. So I've got a little thing. I wrote this down and I called them like my awards. I didn't have a good title for them, like the Cougies or like really weird names out there that I kept thinking of. I couldn't ever think of really anything that was effective. So if you do have an idea for me of what I could call these in the future, drop us a note. Drop it in the YouTube comments below. Drop us a note via social media or email the show, lockedonbyu@gmail.com. I'd love to hear your guys' insight on this. So my superlatives or my awards for BYU training camp. Most improved unit for BYU. I'm going to give that to BYU's cornerbacks on the defense. Now, coming into training camp, it wasn't necessarily a position group they were thinking, okay, they're in dire straits, but with Jacob Robinson there, you're like, okay, they got at least one solidified spot at the cornerback position. What about the other cornerback spot? Well, we saw Maury Bamba take the early reps in training camp while Mark Collins worked his way to full fitness. Over the past week or so, Mark Collins, the Weber State transfer, has really kind of emerged and has become, I think, the complement at that other opposite corner spot of Jacob Robinson. And I think with the depth of what Maury Bamba showed in training camp, as well as the ascension of guys like Evan Johnson, you also can include Trey Alexander, Jonathan Cabella, Who else am I thinking of? Matthias Leach. A lot of the younger players in that unit have come a long way in training camp. And the hope is that it's not all fool's gold, that they have actually improved. And if that is truly the case, BYU's cornerbacks are actually going to be far better than I anticipated them being going into training camp. So I'm going to give them the award. I also had nominees for offensive line. I talked about running backs, but I feel like, you know what? I'm going to go a little bit off the beaten track and talk about BYU's cornerbacks because I do think that they have a critical role to fill in this BYU defense. If they can hold opposing wide receivers in one-on-one coverage, those man press scenarios, and just make sure that it's a no-fly zone for opposing teams, that's going to help BYU out quite a bit. And it's going to be a critical element if BYU wants to improve on defense this fall. Now, the unit still with the most to prove to me is BYU's defensive line. I have heard a lot during training camp from people inside the program about how BYU's defensive line has been holding their own. They've been stonewalling BYU's O-line and making life miserable for Connor Pay and his teammates on the offensive line. I want to see it in game. I'm going to echo what Aaron Roderick has been crowing about all camp long. We can talk, but I want to see it proven in game. I have got concerns that you're running back essentially the same unit of defensive linemen for BYU, but I am expecting to have a better production from a year ago. I know they invested heavily on that defensive coaching staff front. Now, you got guys like Gary Anderson and Chad Kauha'aha'a who are they're essentially glorified assistant coaches. They're analysts and consultants. We also have Sione Puha as the defensive tackles coach. You got Kelly Papinga as the DNs coach. They've got to deliver in a big way. I've expressed confidence that what I'm hearing about this defensive line unit is not all fluff and it's not going to be what it was a season ago. But I still believe it's got to be proven in game. So the team, I guess the position group with the most to prove, it is the BYU defensive line. The position group that I still think has a lot going for it that I have not really considered worrying about is BYU's wide receiver group. Think about it. BYU's got their top 6 pass catchers and 7 if you want to include Keanu Hill, who's now a tight end for BYU, back from last year's team. They have a lot of proven production at that wide receiver group, and the hope is that with that production and obviously the experience of having played in the Big 12 previously, no matter who ends up as BYU's quarterback, will have a complement of weapons around them that if they can effectively deliver the football to those guys, they're going to make them look good. We talked about the rushing attack needing to be a big part of BYU's hopes this year. Well, you know what? When they have those opportunities, if that rushing attack is as effective as we hope it is, well, the best part is those wide receivers find themselves in one-on-one situations. And if you can find yourself open, I have trust that whether it's Jake Retzlaff or Gerry Bohanon, they will deliver a strike down the field and hook up with these guys and make it look easy in the process. That is the hope for the BYU wide receiver group because I just want to see them do their thing. I had very little concerns about them coming into training camp. Don't make me look like a fool now. That's my hope for that. Now, some individual awards. I talked about at the outset of training camp how there would be a guy that would pop up in training camp that was going to steal headlines and make people think, okay, what could this kid offer to the BYU football program? And then you quite literally, and it's sad to say, you never see him in season. The guy I'm going to award that to, and actually it's kind of, no, I'm going to give it to one guy, Sione Moa. Now, it's nothing against Sione himself. He's a walk-on running back from Timpview High School who has been running with the 3rd and 4th string units for BYU on offense. But when you have LJ Martin, when you have Hinkley Ropati, when you have Miles Davis, you had Pokai Haunga, Jovesa Damuni, some of the names at that running back position for BYU, I feel like Sione Moa may be the odd man out there. And it's nothing against him because he is shown to be very effective in training camp so far. And if he wants to prove himself, well, guess what? When he gets those opportunities, go out there and prove it. Maybe he gets that opportunity against Southern Illinois in mop-up duty time, and he shows that he's capable. Well, that's what it's going to take for him to make me eat crow on this. But that's the only thing I have concern about is with the other names in front of him at running back, he can find himself buried on the depth chart, and you just don't see him very often for BYU this fall. It doesn't take anything away from his talent, what he offers to the BYU football program, how capable he was in training camp. But I had to award that award, and that's who gets to carry it going forward here. But that's one of those awards that I always love when a guy ends up proving me dead wrong. And in this case, I hope it's Sione Moa, because I call him Sione Moa because there's also a Sione Moa on defense who's a linebacker that we also have to kind of differentiate the two. So kind of in the media group we've talked about, we're going to, Sione Moa is how we're going to refer to him. So keep an eye on that. If I'm wrong about it and he proves to be a capable back and part of the rotation, great. Love to see it. I love when guys exceed expectations for the BYU football program. Now, the guy that I think still has a lot to prove just in terms of what I want to see from him out on the football field, essentially kind of the opposite of what we were just talking about, is I'm looking at this as a major opportunity for Harrison Taggart. Harrison Taggart, I think, is going to be BYU starting middle linebacker, and he's got sizable shoes to fill with Ben Bywater exiting the program with his medical retirement. That's a disappointing thing to see Ben have to step away from the game that he loves. And I think you look at it and you think, who could step into that role and fill it the way it needs to be filled? And I don't think there's a like-for-like replacement on the roster, but Harrison Taggart is going to get, I believe, the first crack at being that guy. Harrison has worked extremely hard. He's bulked up. He's kept his sideline to sideline speed. He's not the tallest guy in terms of those linebackers out there, but what he lacks in height, he makes up for with just playmaking ability. Can he really become that stalwart, the guy who's in the middle of that defense, calling out the audibles, because he will have that green dot on his helmet, he'll have that communication system calling the plays from Jay Hill in his helmet. Can he be that field general on defense that BYU needs him to be? I hope he does, because that he's got a lot to prove, because Ben Bywater was one of the leading tackle leaders in the Big 12 coming into the season. And he was, for lack of a better term, the heart and soul of that BYU defense for the better part of 3 seasons. You don't replace that very easily, but Harrison Taggart, he's got a lot to prove. And if he proves it, that could be a really, really nice thing, because that means BYU's defense is going to be that much more effective as they go into year 2 in the Big 12. And once again, like I said, it makes me can't eat my words. I love when guys make me do that, because it proves that my evaluation, which pales in comparison to many out there, it's wrong. And I love when guys prove me wrong when it comes to BYU, because that means the BYU football program benefits from that as well. All right. So there you go. That's what I got for you guys in terms of like some superlatives, some awards I handed out. And like I said, if you got an idea of what I might call these going forward, I'd like to hear it. Oh, one other one real quick, just on the quarterback battlefront. I thought about awarding an award for that, but I couldn't really think of anything effective that made sense. So essentially coming down the pipe is that the wait and see award. Who's going to be the guy? Who's going to be the guys at quarterback for BYU? Is it Jake? Is it Gerry? Is it both of them? TBD. So we'll see where it all ultimately pans out in the end for BYU. All right. We will finish up today's edition of the podcast talking about BYU's first opponent. An interesting thing emerged with BYU's initial line, speaking of betting lines, going into this. Can we learn from that? What does it mean for BYU? And quite literally, if BYU currently meets the line that's being projected out there, would it be a disappointment for the Cougars and for you as Cougar fans? We'll talk about that next right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Ibata. Now, a lot of us buy a lot of things every single day. Trust me, I got 3 kids. We spent all summer long buying sunscreen, sandals, copious amounts of snacks. No matter what you're buying, do it with our friends at Ibata and get some money back in the process. That's the thing about this. It makes you have peace of mind with your purchases, knowing that, hey, on the back end, I'm taking advantage of some incredible opportunities. It's summertime, obviously, still right now with kids going back to school. It's barbecue season. You can stock up on all your grilling favorites and also your back to school supplies. And the best part is you don't have to choose between burgers or hot dogs. You can get both and you can get money back on both of them at the same time. Ibata is a free app that helps you earn cash back every time you shop, earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys for your kids. It's got options across the board, quite literally. I've used it for years. My wife picked up on it, I don't know, like pre-pandemic, and we've used it for a long time. The best part is the average Ibata user earns over $256 a year. Think about it, $250 back in your pockets. Right now, Ibata is offering all of our customers a free $5 for trying out Ibata using the promo code LOCKEDONCollege when you register on the app. So download the app today on the App Store or the Google Play Store and get that free $5 by using the promo code LOCKEDONCollege on the Ibata app. Once again, that's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use that promo code LOCKEDONCollege to take advantage of the offer from our friends at Ibata. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first view and or listen of the day. If you have not done so already, what are you waiting for? Sign up for our Locked On Cougars Insider Group. I'm sharing insider tidbits. I'm hearing about the BYU football program, BYU basketball program, and everything else in between. We're having a lot of fun interacting one-on-one with you all who are already in it. I hope that many more of us sign up in the coming days and weeks as we gear up for BYU football season beginning very, very shortly. All right. An emerging trend has pointed out that BYU's opening line against Southern Illinois has opened up as high as I've seen it as high as 20 points at different sports books. Our friends at FanDuel had it at 19.5 points last I checked. But an emerging trend is that number has been pared down over time. Does that mean the BYU's in trouble here? Now, Southern Illinois is the 11th ranked team in the preseason FCS poll. They're no slouch. Speaking of the Salukis, they're going to come in here upset minded. There's always those games every single year that an FCS team or two seems to upset a team that has paid them to come in and beat them on their home turf. It happens annually. Get ready for it. It's going to happen at some point this year. The hope is that you're not that team that suffers that ignominy of being the team that lost to the FCS team. It's a bad look, and BYU needs to avoid that. Most of the lines out there, I know that Vanquish the Foe wrote about this, saw that line drop to 16.5 points. Is BYU going to disappoint you if they win that game by 17 points and cover that spread if it holds currently? Now, that obviously can change a lot here in the next week and a half leading up to that game. That line could change. But if BYU were to win by 2 touchdowns and a field goal, is that going to feel like enough for you to be like, you know what? BYU's doing just fine. They're right on the right track. Remember, a year ago, BYU grinded out that win against Sam Houston State, and I don't think anybody felt comfortable with what BYU showed against a first-time Conference USA member taking on BYU in Provo. And I look at it, and if BYU, let's say, were to beat SIU, so if you wanted that 17-point spread, they cover it with 17 points, and you say the score is, just off the top of my head, it's 28-10. Is that going to make you think that BYU covered the spread effectively, or 27-10? The 17-point spread. I would say probably not. I'm just spitballing here. Like I said, I welcome any and all feedback. I look at this. I think BYU, if they want to make Cougar fans think that it's going to be a different season, I know it's the first game of the year, and they're getting a lot of kinks out, and obviously it's your first time facing a team that's not your own, quite literally in 9 or 10 months. In the case of BYU, there's going to be things that are going to pop up in game, but it feels like 17 points may not be enough for Cougar fans to kind of exhale and say, okay, we're all right. Am I wrong about that? I don't know. I welcome your feedback. If I'm wrong and you think that 17 points would make you think, okay, we're good here, maybe it's more about the actual score. Let's say BYU goes out and piles up, let's say 38 points, but they win that game 38-21. Is that enough for you? Maybe it's about the overall offensive output that matches the number in your head that you think would be effective. I don't know. I just look at this, and seeing that line come down, first off, was interesting. But more importantly, these FCS games are so weird. I've advocated for years that I think these FCS games should be played at the end of spring camp, essentially as a way to cap off your spring game. It still gives the paycheck to those FCS schools, but at the same time, you're not having, and I hate to say this, but I get so bored watching FCS versus FBS games. Yes, for every upset or two every year, there are 50 or 100 other one of those games where the favorite, speaking of the FBS team, just blows the doors off these teams and sends them packing with a paycheck for their troubles. I look at it, and you want to avoid, obviously, the upset. And BYU, if you lose that game against Southern Illinois, I feel like BYU is going to have a lot bigger issues, and we'll be looking at a far worse season than any of us, and I'm yours truly included, expect for the Cougars this fall. But once again, if it's just a 17-point win for BYU, I'm not sure that's going to satisfy the thirst that Cougar fans have for an improved BYU football product. So I'm going to be monitoring this in the lead up to this game, and obviously we'll look at it afterwards in terms of, okay, how did the Cougars perform? Was it enough for you as a Cougar fan? That's going to be a major talking point this season for BYU, and more importantly, the season opener against Southern Illinois, because it's the only non-conference home game. The next time BYU's back at LaVell Edwards Stadium, it's when it really counts, and you got a big dog in Kansas State coming in with the whole thought that they are one of the favorites, if not the favorite in the Big 12 Conference. So home field advantage is going to be critical for BYU, and you've got to establish that early and hopefully run away with it against Southern Illinois. And I like I said, if it's just a 17-point win, that may not be enough to satisfy Cougar fans. Like I said, I welcome your feedback. If I'm wrong about that, let me know. But if you think that needs to be 20, 25, 28 points in that spread to make you feel comfortable, I'd also welcome that feedback. All right, so there you go. That's what I got for you guys on this Wednesday edition of the podcast. Cannot thank you guys enough for your continued support of the podcast. As always, it's always fun to interact with y'all. I do need to give a quick shout out. Many of you know that my grandfather passed away recently. I needed to get a new suit for that. I'm not being paid for this. I'm just going to give a shout out to Odeon Menswear. Braden and his team over there at Odeon. I needed to get a new suit. Circumstances put on the suit I was planning on wearing. Let's just put it this way. Needed to upgrade. So I made a call in to Odeon and Braden. They said, hey, come on down. We'll get you fitted. They took care of me. It was a first-rate experience. I'm not being paid to talk about this. It was absolutely incredible what they did for me. So if you have any menswear or suit needs, check out Odeon Menswear because they're listeners of the podcast. I know Braden, he's a big time listener, and I appreciate that support. But it was a really, really first-rate experience. So if you're looking for an option when it comes to your menswear needs, check out Odeon Menswear. And once again, that's just a little plug for them them helping me out in a very, very tight window to get a new suit for my grandfather's funeral coming up later this week. So nonetheless, I just needed to fit that in there. I meant to mention that earlier on in the podcast, but you know what? Better late than never. All right, that's going to do it for today's show. A big thank you, as always, for making it your first and view and or listen of the day. And, of course, thank you to all of you who are everydayers with us here. And we'll catch you guys again tomorrow right here on Locked On Cougars.